In the rural highlands of Jamaica, in a remote clearing, lies the body of a black teenager brutally murdered by a gang of white racists 18 years ago. His name represents one of the most shameful episodes of British race relations history. It has come to symbolise an iconic struggle against injustice and sends a shudder through the corridors of power. His name is Stephen Lawrence.
Murder in South London 2 years ago of the black teenager
Stephen Lawrence's family are determined to carry on their long search for the truth about his murder.
Out of the blue, he was attacked and stabbed.
Stephen Lawrence's 19th birthday, his family lead a vigil at the South London bus stop.
For 18 years, Doreen and Neville Lawrence have struggled to win justice for their murdered son.
The justice system is saying to the white kids out there, you can do whatever you like to black people and we're not going to do anything to you.
This is the story of how an ordinary family exposed one of Britain's biggest organisations as institutionally racist.
Obviously didn't try hard enough for this case. And one of the factors undoubtedly in my mind was the fact that the family were black.
Since 1993, the prime suspects of this racist killing have treated the justice system with contempt.
They were just laughing in our faces that they knew that was it. You know, they got away with murder.
Over the past 12 months, Panorama has been granted exclusive access to Doreen Lawrence and her family.
The fact that somebody's been held to account and they've gone to prison for him, that would be the closure I'm looking for.
We follow the story of one woman's relentless fight for justice on the day that time finally ran out for two of her son's killers. Just minutes ago, amidst dramatic and emotional scenes here at the Old Bailey, Gary Dobson and David Norris have been found guilty of the murder of Stephen Lawrence.
Despite these verdicts, today is not a cause for celebration. How can I celebrate when my son lies buried? When I cannot see him or speak to him, when will I see, when I'll see him grow up and go to university, or get married, or have children?
Few would doubt, had it not been for the tenacity of the Lawrences, and especially Doreen, this day might never have come. But there is a private, untold story of this woman's quest for justice. This is the story of the Stephen Lawrence saga that you haven't yet heard through the eyes of his mother.
Stephen was the firstborn, yeah, and I remember when I was pregnant, I wanted to have a son, so I was more than over the moon when Stephen was born. As a baby, he had a temperament, Stephen did, you know. That hasn't changed while he was growing up. He was determined. He knew exactly what he wanted. He was very creative. He loved drawing. He took part in all the sports that happened in school. He took part in the mini marathon back in '88.
How did he do in that?
He came 100 and something, but I think the mere fact that he finished the course was quite good.
He was almost like that annoying older brother that, as a younger brother, you could never ever sort of get to that level. As much as you tried, as much as you... It didn't matter how hard I worked, it didn't matter how hard I trained. When I thought I got to a certain place, I'd look up and he'd always move that marker another step forward.
It's hard to believe that he would have been 37. I think about him practically all the time. You know, would he have had the family? You know, where would he be in his career and stuff like that? But I still have him as being a young man.
For the British public, the Stephen Lawrence story begins in southeast London on April 22nd, 1993. The events of that evening and their aftermath would change the face of race relations in Britain. 18-year-old Stephen Lawrence and his friend Dwayne Brooks found themselves in Eltham trying to catch a bus home.
Why don't we go and see if there's a bus coming?
Nah, I should wait here. This was an area that had already seen 3 racist murders in as many years.
There's a bus coming. Can you see it coming?
A gang of white youths crossed the road, one of them shouting racist abuse.
I saw the first person who shouted, what nigger? He hit Steve with a striking blow from up above, straight down. At the time of the blow, he did scream. I've never heard anybody scream like that before.
The attack was brief, lasting only 10 seconds. Long enough, though, to inflict 2 deadly stab wounds.
Steve, get up! Come on, Steve, let's go!
There's a terrible purity about the murder of Stephen Lawrence. The word nigger is used at the scene. And it's a sad fact that in anything else called a racist murder, people look around for other explanations. It's a defense mechanism, I think, among white people to say, oh, well, there must be some other explanation, or there must be some qualifying factors. Here, there are no qualifying factors. They attack this young man because he's black. Everything points to that.
Stephen managed to run more than 200 yards before he collapsed. This was a remarkable feat, as the knife had severed 2 of his main arteries.
Steve, get up! Steve! Steve, get up!
He died where he fell, on a cold pavement in Eltham, in a pool of his own blood, around 15 minutes after he was attacked.
We were told about the knock on the door, and that's one knock on the door that happened. We drove to the hospital. I remember as I walked in, I saw a young man in front of me. I never was coming in, so he recognised Dwayne straight away. And so I rushed up to him, asking him what had happened. But he wasn't able to answer me. And straight away, I think it was a nurse, ushered us into a room and asked us to wait there. Then we were told that Stephen had died. And it's just like watching a drama. It was like, died? No, he's not. He can't be.
Within hours, 5 boys would emerge as the prime suspects and remain so for the next 18 years. They are Gary Dobson, David Norris, Neil Aycourt, his brother Jamie Aycourt and Luke Knight. Over the years, they have strutted their way through an inquest and an inquiry, whilst 3 of them, Dobson, Knight and Neil Aycourt, were acquitted of the murder in 1996. I followed the case closely for many years and in 2006 made a controversial programme for the BBC raising new concerns about police corruption and the suspects' alibis. The case had been dormant, but a fresh review was launched, resulting in the dramatic discovery of new scientific evidence. And in 2010, 2 of the 5, David Norris and Gary Dobson, were charged with murder. But under double jeopardy law, Dobson cannot be tried twice for the same crime without a special hearing at the Court of Appeal, where it must be proved the evidence is new and compelling. Our journey with Dorian Lawrence begins over a year ago in a barrister's chambers in London.
Okay, but when they saying that, they thought that they had more on Dobson than they did on Norris.
Dobson's subject to double jeopardy, Norris isn't.
Yeah, I know, but then...
Doreen, her QC Mike Mansfield and lawyer Imran Khan are preparing for a meeting with the Met Police and the Crown Prosecution Service. With unprecedented openness, Doreen has already been told what the new evidence is.
Just to remind you, I don't know whether you've forgotten, is what they found was Stephen's blood on Dobson's collar and mitochondrial DNA linking Norris to Stephen and Fibre.
But is this new forensic evidence strong enough to overcome the double jeopardy hurdle?
DNA in particular is quite a strong piece of evidence against somebody. And so when I hear that there's a link between the suspects and the victim based upon DNA, then I think that is, I could take an optimistic outlook. Doreen hasn't. No surprise, because of the years of failures and disappointments. They seem to be fairly confident, but, I had no idea.
To me, I think until the time comes when I hear the verdict where they found them guilty, I think that's the only time I'm going to be able to say, oh, well, thank God for that. And yes, I believe that will happen. And until that happens, I just can't. I can't allow myself to be there. I really can't.
I think in her heart of hearts, she wants this to be a success. And I think if she doesn't get it, I can't even imagine what effect it would have on her.
There is much at stake, and not just for the family. For the Met, the Lawrence case has represented a running sore on the force's reputation.
They have invested millions of pounds, millions of person hours. They have invested everything in this. This is their attempt at redemption. And if they get it wrong, they're in for a nasty surprise.
The Met are terrified of Doreen Lawrence, aren't they?
Yes, I think most people are.
But for now, the meeting with the prosecutors has gone well.
I think we were very pleased that they were willing to have the meeting so Doreen could meet the people actually involved and get a feeling of their approach, the feelings that they have about the case, because Doreen's been there before.
The fibres and everything that they have, they're very confident, but I'm still a little bit on the fence. I think I've been there before when we've been able to say, well, we've got this and this. It's the Court of Appeal, that's going to be the test.
The court has to decide in one case whether, in fact, it can go back for trial because the person's already been on trial once, the double jeopardy situation. In order to do that, it has to meet a very high threshold. So obviously, that's going to be the next big test.
Over the years, several dogged re-investigations have failed to crack the case. But it was the first investigation which was crucial, and it was hampered by incompetence and institutional racism from the outset. As Stephen lay dying on Wellhall Road in April 1993, officers made a series of fundamental errors and assumptions which would haunt the Met for years to come.
Where's the ambulance?
All right.
Call the ambulance, not the police.
Stephen's friend Dwayne described a racist assault, pointing out the direction their attackers had fled.
A gang of white boys attacked us. They ran up Dixon's Road. Go after them!
But the police appeared to be focusing their suspicions on him.
I was in shock. I didn't know he had been stabbed. They were more interested in how he got those injuries. Was it me that attacked him? Did we have a fight? Or were we in a gang fight?
Initially believing Stephen had received a blow to the head, police failed to detect the real cause of the emerging pool of blood, 2 5-inch stab wounds.
Officers were as panicked as I was and seemed to be in shock just as I was. But they were also repelled from touching him because of the blood, like I was.
2 passers-by were Connor and Louise Taff, Christians on their way home from a prayer meeting. They were with Stephen during his last moments. They told how police failed to provide any medical attention to Stephen.
There was no attempt by the officers to try and staunch the blood, staunch the bleeding?
No, there was no attempt to staunch the bleeding.
But the blood was very visible. It was...
Yes.
It's a sad thing to leave the world with so much hate directed at you. I just said, you are loved. I just wanted him to know that somebody cared.
We just tried to pray over him and said, Lord bless him and Lord heal him. I wished I had enough faith, that I could try and raise him from the dead. Sorry.
2 officers tried to take a pulse, but no first aid was administered. and by the time the paramedics arrived at 5 to 11, Stephen was already dead.
I checked all of those officers who'd done first aid courses. All of them had no idea what first aid was about. I said, what is the ABC of first aid? Airways, breathing and circulation. None of them knew the full ABC. They didn't even know what ABC stood for. None of them actually touched him properly at all. They didn't do any first aid at all.
There is this confused scene, and a police inspector arrives, and he would say later, takes charge. And he made a whole series of assumptions about what had happened, for which there were no grounds, and for which the Macpherson inquiry would later conclude he made those assumptions because Duane and Stephen were black.
The death of their son has left the Lawrences believing London is cruel and hostile. The family said they did not want Stephen laid to rest in racist soil, and his body was flown to their home country, Jamaica.
The Lawrences were never able to grieve in peace. Just days after the funeral, they received news that the Crown Prosecution Service was dropping murder charges against 2 of the suspects. But for Doreen Lawrence, that would never do, and this signalled the beginning of her long battle against the police and the judiciary. It's March 2011, and I've come to Jamaica with Doreen. I'm hoping to learn about her upbringing, which might give me an insight into what has driven this woman all these years. Doreen was born and lived in the rural highlands of Jamaica and used to play amongst the trees here. But in 1993, this quiet place took on a new significance. It's where Stephen is buried. The Lawrences keep its location a fiercely guarded secret, but Doreen has agreed to let us film here.
You can tell by the amount of years I've been coming, the amount of flowers has been bought. It's always a very sad time. And as this picture's beginning to wear out, I think I'll have to get another one done for him. I'll get another one done.
This is a peaceful place for Doreen, a place to reflect and quietly speak to her son. But I am slightly taken aback when the anger she still feels rises to the surface.
I'm really pleased that I have buried him here, because had he been buried in the UK, his grave had been desecrated so many times. Here, nobody knows where he is. Then again, I think the country didn't deserve to have his body there anyway, because they took his life, so I just think they didn't deserve him, so. You know, I think it's still the best thing that we did, that we brought him here, so he can be next to his great-grandmother, so she can help look after him. I try and talk to him in my head. I just talk to him about how we are, what we're doing. I like to have that time that I can talk to him.
This is a side to Doreen Lawrence the public never get to see. Her reputation is one of an impassioned campaigner and a formidable opponent. I wanted to know how those who knew her as a child remembered her.
We're going to meet a lady called Joy who seems to know me. So I must have been very young. Hello.
I see!
Well, you remember me?
Yes!
Hello.
Ah, you're good, yes.
Joy looked after Doreen's grandfather until he died and has clear memories of a young Doreen and the childhood traits that led to her nickname, Icy.
So in Britain, a nickname like Icy would mean that you were quite tough as a child. Is that why she was called Icy?
No, I think it's something in the family tradition. All I know that Icy hard-working persons.
Oh, well, I'm definitely that.
They are kind persons.
I'm definitely that.
Yes, loving.
I think I'm
yes.
that.
I think, yes, I know.
It's been a short trip, and there's just time for a final visit to Stephen's grave. Though many years have passed since his death, these moments do not get any easier.
It's like a bittersweet moment, really. You know, yes, I will have to get back home, but at the same time, it's saying goodbye to him again. And it's always again and again.
By the time you come back here to see Stephen again, what would you hope to be telling him?
That somebody's gone to prison for his death. Somebody, hopefully. Yeah, that's what I'd like to be able to tell him.
Do you think that a positive result in this trial would give you closure?
I think where I'm concerned that he's no longer here, so that would always be there for me. But the fact that somebody's been held to account and they've gone to prison for him, that would be the closure that I'm looking for.
Doreen knows she must put the tranquility of Jamaica behind her and prepare for what awaits over the coming months. The countdown to one of the most eagerly anticipated murder trials in recent history has begun. In 1993, Gary Dobson and David Norris were part of the gang of 5 who have always been the prime suspects for this murder. Led by Neil, the eldest of the Acorn brothers, the gang had a fearsome reputation for carrying and using knives. Dobson was more of a follower, if perhaps brighter than the others. Norris was a different story. Aged just 16, he was the violent son of a drug-dealing gangster. Within 48 hours of Stephen's murder, the police received no fewer than 26 tip-offs, mostly naming the same group of boys.
All know to use and carry knives openly. One was seen in the area of stabbing. The boys who did the murder, there are 5 of them. They're nutters. Fine killer if you arrest them. Were involved in a stabbing when you arrest them. All know they call themselves the Craze. Knives openly. One was seen in the area of stabbing.
Despite this, no arrests were made. Not even when a police surveillance team watched Jamie Acorn leave his house carrying a bin liner potentially full of evidence, get into a car and drive away.
The police wasn't interested in Stephen. They weren't interested in catching his killers at all. They assumed that Stephen must know his killers, that we must be into crime, and so was Stephen. And suggesting that, they found a glove on Stephen, as if to say he was into crime. It's like they're assuming that all black families are criminals.
Spring 2011, it's a double jeopardy hearing at the High Court. Only Gary Dobson is subject to these proceedings, since David Norris has never stood trial for Stephen's murder. Everything hinges on this hearing. If the CPS cannot persuade the 3 judges the new evidence meets the legal threshold, there will be no trial at all. Doreen and Imran are preparing for court.
We're second day into being at the High Court.
Once the witnesses are done, the lawyers are going to make submissions to the court as to whether the acquittal should be overturned or not. So once that's all heard, submissions made, then we wait.
So if we get through and the judges say, well, yes, we can go to trial, then it's a much stronger possibility. But at the same time, I'm still a little bit cautious. So I'm not going to be saying, oh yeah, whoopee. I just think this is fantastic. We are going to get there.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Take it. Another day.
prosecutors believe they've found the evidence proving Gary Dobson was part of the group of boys who attacked Stephen Lawrence. They claim that at some point during the attack, possibly as the knife was drawn back for a second strike, a tiny spot of Stephen's blood became airborne. And it was this microscopic blob measuring less than 0.5 millimetre which eventually landed on the collar of Dobson's jacket and, crucially, soaked into the weave. New advances in DNA technology enabled scientists to prove it was Stephen's, with odds of 1 billion to 1 that it belonged to anybody else. Clothes fibres belonging to Stephen were also found, but it was this minute bloodstain that would form the central plank of the prosecution case.
There were fibres that had already been found, and they'd been found way back in 1995 and 1993. We also followed a line of hair, human hair. There appeared to be quite a considerable amount of human hair. And as a result of that, they realised that there was a potential for blood as well. And that, at that moment, I think it became very significant what we'd found.
But the defence has an explanation for all of this. Contamination. They say that dried blood fragments and fibres from Stephen's blood-stained clothes must have escaped through degenerated seals throughout years of scientific testing. This claim is bolstered by a litany of examples of poor evidence handling, when various key exhibits have been stored or even photographed together. Dobson's team insist this fatally undermines the prosecution evidence and that it doesn't deserve to go before a jury. But for Doreen and Imran, it's the first they've heard of it.
The arrest, all the information, didn't collect the evidence, so it's just a catalogue of stuff, and like listening to it now, nothing much has changed.
When I heard it, I was shocked, and it was staggering that if you wanted to pick any case that Metropolitan Police wanted to make sure that they had dealt with properly after all the criticisms, it would be this one. Yet despite that, things were not being kept properly. I mean, what's concerning me now is that I can hear, if this goes to trial, how the defence are going to make hay with this. And they're going to suggest to the jury, you can't trust this. Putting legal hat on, looking at it, hopefully objectively, you'd say, yeah, they've got over that threshold. And I want to be able to say to you, I hope I can say to you, I was right.
Okay, well, I hope so too. Only time will tell.
It's Good Friday. It's also the anniversary of Stephen's death. And whilst the family waits for the judge's decision, Stuart Lawrence addresses a special memorial service to his brother.
I'd just like to share with you some really good memories that we both shared, me and Stephen, every Sunday. As far back as I can remember, we used to come to this church, and I can look around and I can see memories. Because it just reminds me.
In the early days, I did after Stephen's death. As I say, I questioned why wasn't God there to protect Stephen, and I had really difficulty in that in the early days.
And I'd just like to say I'm really grateful for all the help and support you've given my family over all these years as well, especially my mum.
And then I presume I start thinking that everything happens for a reason, and I think all the things that's happened around since Stephen's death, even though he had such a cruel death, it's like it was meant to be, because all the changes that's happened, and hadn't Stephen died, a lot of things would never have happened. That's the things I start thinking about whenever I'm here. People say to me, well, you know how strong you are. I don't think I'm strong. I don't think I'm strong at all. I just think, you know, there's something there carrying me. and helping me through. So I'm not doing it on my own. If there's one thing I must say, I don't forgive the boys who've killed Stephen. They took away Stephen's life, and there's nothing in them, in their behaviour or anything to show that they regret what their actions have done and the pain that it's caused us as a family.
Today the judges deliver their decision, and the Lawrences learn if Gary Dobson will stand trial for Stephen's murder alongside David Norris.
Just want to get today over with, and then we can evaluate from there, so to speak. It's going to be hard. It's going to be hard.
I'm not sure if both individuals are going to be in court today. I suppose I'm just looking forward to seeing what they look like now, because in the past, say 10 years or so, I've not seen. So, and everybody's grown up and got a bit older. Steve was never allowed to get older. They just got on with their life as if to say nothing's happened. And it's like, yeah, you know, you thought you got away with it. With a bit of luck, you know, when the judgment comes out today, we'll say, yeah, we've got you. Well, not quite, but we're on the road.
At 10 o'clock this morning, we go into court for, and we get judgment, decision. The prosecution are allowed to tell the family and myself an hour before what that decision is going to be. So we'll know an hour before. So we'll go into court knowing the decision. If it's a good decision, that'll be an hour on cloud nine. If it's a bad decision, then that hour is going to be a very painful hour.
It's the result Doreen's been waiting for. The new evidence is strong enough to go in front of a jury. Gary Dobson and David Norris will stand trial.
It's been a long time in coming, but we still have a long way to go. And so at this moment in time, all I can think about is Stephen. And that perhaps somewhere down the line we will finally get justice for him. Because I think it's just been a long time for us to get to this position. And that's all I wanted to say. Even though you hear all of it, but is it real? Is it real? You know, after 18 years, are we actually going to have a trial where the CPS are, you know, all gun-ho to say, yes, we want to make something happen?
It's a bit surreal, really. You know, you're not... Is this really happening? Is this some sort of dream? You know, is this going to be the start of a big hope that ends in disappointment?
There will be a trial.
It's 18 years too late, isn't it, the trial?
Yeah.
The worry is now, having heard some of the evidence, which is fine for this stage, is it enough for a trial?
Doreen is no stranger to overcoming obstacles. From the beginning, she found herself up against an establishment that didn't want to listen. Within just 48 hours of Stephen's murder, there were already strong grounds for arrest. But it took an intervention from the world's #1 humanitarian, Nelson Mandela, before the police finally moved.
If a black person had committed a murder, they would have arrested him by now. But because it's a black and it's white, it seems as if they're condoning what these people are doing, because they're not showing to us that they are out there doing their job and arresting people.
Next day, despite no significant new evidence, police started arresting the suspects, including Dobson and Norris. But during interviews, the boys, who were all aged just 16 and 17, gave little away.
Can you give me your full name, please?
Neil Charles Acolt.
Do you agree that the tapes were unsealed in your presence?
You told me I ain't got to say nothing, and I don't want to say nothing yet.
We're investigating.
A vast array of weapons was seized from the houses, but none could be proved to be the knife used in the attack.
No comment. RC22. It's a tiger lock knife. No comment. Exhibit RC21 is a Gurkha type knife. RC25. No comment. This is a sword in a scabbard found.
David Norris also remained tight-lipped.
Are you going to tell us where you were that night?
No reply.
Do you remember that night?
No reply.
Gary Dobson, on the other hand, was much more talkative.
Where do you want this to start? From what side?
As well he might be. Dobson had some explaining to do. He'd already told police during their house-to-house inquiries he stayed home all night. But by the time of this interview, the police knew otherwise.
Yeah, you are, bro.
A local youth had heard about the stabbing, put two and two together and turned up at the Acorts house an hour after the murder.
What's up? Look, there's been a stabbing down Wellow. Yeah. You boys don't know nothing about it? Why should we? Where else was it?
This witness would later claim he saw Dobson, Norris and the Acorts cleaning themselves up and acting suspiciously.
Alright, well look, I'm just saying, yeah? He's dead. So now you told us.
Word got out this boy had spoken to the police about what he'd seen. Dobson changed his story.
You stayed indoors all that night? No, I popped out at 11:45, that's 11:45, ran to a friend's house to get a CD and then came straight back. I was only out for 10, 15
Then Dobson repeatedly lied about knowing David Norris.
Why did you not tell us you knew Norris? What's the cover up with Norris? I don't know Norris. I know of a David Norris. I don't know a David Norris. He's the madman with a knife at the moment. I know of a David Norris.
But unknown to Dobson, he'd been photographed with Norris outside the Acorts house just a week before. Many items of clothing had been seized, including a jacket from Dobson and a pair of jeans from Norris's room, but they would yield no useful forensic evidence, for now. By the summer of 1993, the case ground to a halt. Today, Doreen's full-time job is keeping Stephen's case in the public eye. In a lasting memorial, she helped set up and is a director of the Stephen Lawrence Charitable Trust in Greenwich, a purpose-built centre which trains and funds budding architects.
Tonight's about celebrating the life of Stephen Lawrence. And
Doreen hates the limelight, but never shirks from being the public face of the campaign.
We're really honoured to really be part of the story, really, with Doreen and Neville and the family.
Doreen and Neville divorced in 1999. Events like these are amongst the only times they meet.
But these balloons are balloons that have Stephen's name and his signature on them. And we're going to invite the family first to release their balloons. God bless you, Stephen. Ladies and gentlemen, a toast, Stephen Lawrence. May his name rise and rise and rise.
We're here to look back at what's happened since his death and to look forward to the future and the work of the Trust. What I'm most proud of is having this magnificent building and the work that takes place in it. Working hard to make Stephen Lawrence a name and all the achievement to be a lasting legacy for years to come.
If it was me and I lost a loved one, I don't know whether I'd be able to go out there and say the things that she does, do things she does, put a brave face on, a smile on, and meet hundreds of people, and all she wants to do is to stick her head under the pillow and just grieve. And I have great respect for that, huge admiration. I can carry on with my job. I've got other cases. This is her life, and I'm so in awe of the fact that she can continue the way that she does.
At some point, I'd love to be able to say bye-bye and to see the Trust can
support itself. It is hard because I am just a regular mum, you know, who's lost a son, and I have campaigned. And I think if from the word go had the police caught his killers and did what they needed, nobody would ever hear from me or even know who I am. Been divorced now for the past, 11 years? I think we'll have to be married. I don't know, probably not. I think things were probably going wrong before Stephen's death. I've got nobody in my life since then. You know, you can be out with loads of people and you're still on your own.
After the failure of the first investigation in 1993, the family intensified the pressure on the Met and a fresh inquiry was launched the following year. This time, detectives set about their task with vigour and installed a tiny camera in a plug socket of Gary Dobson's flat. The surveillance footage showed Dobson, pictured here with a large knife, Norris, and others at play and in their element. The results were shocking.
There's a nigger there who like me bucket this years ago. Well, standing like me pocket, pulled it out, I picked the thing off, and I went, that'll do there, Mick, before I end up cutting you out. I'm telling you, I'm taking my skin the black line, torture and sex of a line. I'll throw their 2 legs and arms on the same one. You go, I let them squirm with the floor and keep rolling, kick the barrel around. Been bowling around like that.
They behave in a way which, as evidence of racism, is shocking almost beyond belief, certainly almost beyond bearing.
You brother little where they're born a few weeks ago.
The film shows Neil Acortt with a knife virtually all the time. As he is talking, he's waving the knife around, he's making stabbing movements in the air, he's making a sort of strange bowling movement with the knife in a very sinister way. He replicates the way in which Stephen Lawrence was attacked.
It's evidence of virulent racism and a violent obsession with knives, but not evidence of murder. The investigation stalled again. The Lawrences, frustrated at yet another failure, took matters into their own hands, and in 1996 brought a private prosecution.
The parents of Stephen Lawrence arrive at the Old Bailey for the start of the trial.
Charges were laid against Gary Dobson, Luke Knight and Neil Acortt, but the case rested heavily on Dwayne Brooks, who had picked out Acortt and Knight in an ID parade. But his evidence was deemed inadmissible, and before the jury got to see the police surveillance video, the case fell apart.
I don't think what happened today is fair at all. As you can see, my wife is not here today, so you can just judge how she feels.
I remember collapsing. When I went home, they'd get a doctor to see me. And I think that's probably one of the first time I've actually saw a doctor since Stephen's death, because I think I've been holding myself for so long that keeping myself going. And I think that was probably the last straw. And it affected me quite badly.
3 of the principal suspects, including Dobson, walked free from court, and because of the way the law stood at the time, they believed they could never be tried again. In a storeroom at the back of the trust, Doreen is taking me through a box of Stephen's belongings.
Who's that? He's an artist and he was the one who...
I can see that despite the public profile she craves for Stephen's legacy, Doreen guards closely her private memories of him.
Well, these are just some pictures that of him as he grew up. I didn't like the idea of too many photos of Stephen being out. I just think that everybody just seems to want to have photos of him, and I just think no. The one is enough, then that way you have some control. This is when he was a cub and a scout. So we've got his cap still. This is when he was a cub. So we've got his jumper. Baton. And all his badges. And so he's got his bronze and silver badge, so he didn't quite get his gold. And this is just his work. And then when I look at the date of when he did that, he did it on the 7th of April, 15 days before he died, when he did that.
And you say you can't read it?
No, I can't read it, no.
Why not?
I don't know, I find it difficult. Because when I look at, you know, what he could achieve and see his work here, I just, no, I'm not ready to read this yet. Not ready to read this yet. In the early days, I know there was days when I'd lock myself in my room, I didn't come out, and that was really a dark place. And I know once you're in there, it's very difficult to take yourself back out. And I'm always worried about allowing myself to go back there.
With just 2 months until the trial, Doreen's decided to have a family barbecue. It's a rare opportunity to see her and Stuart relaxing.
It's just a good way to get the family together, to spend some time together, socialising, you know, less stressful times and stuff. And I hope there's a positive outcome, just because, more for my mum's sake than myself, because then it would help her put this to rest and her to move on. I think that's the most important thing for me, really.
What you got then to give your old auntie, darling?
Chicken's ready, sausages are ready.
Doreen's sister Cheryl has been a crucial pillar of support throughout the years.
She didn't ask for this. This is not the life she planned for herself. But I think from the 22nd of April 1993, her world became dark. And I'm hoping by the end of the year there will be a light. What we need is justice. I don't think she'll stop until she hears guilty.
And it was the Lawrence family's relentless search for answers which eventually forced a full public inquiry in 1998.
Doreen Lawrence, Stephen's mother, has been highly critical of the police investigation into her son's death. Today she heard evidence...
The Macpherson inquiry would become the watershed moment in British race relations history.
Sir Paul Condon arrived for a furious battle of wills over just how racist his force is.
It exposed the Met, and in particular its first investigation into Stephen's murder, as institutionally racist.
And I think she went through the inquiry almost saying, I told you so, I told you so. Look, this is what was happening, and I knew it all along.
The crucial thing about the institutional racism is that there was a collective failure of the police, as we called it, a collective failure. Almost every decision that should have been made didn't get made. If it did get made, there weren't records of it. And if there were records of it, the decisions were wrong.
Amongst 70 recommendations made by the inquiry, Sir William Macpherson called for a complete overhaul of police training and, crucially, a change in the double jeopardy law, which eventually led to the current prosecution. But the inquiry would be remembered as much for its damning verdict of the Met as it would for the scenes outside after the 5 suspects had finished their evidence and revealed very little once again.
They were just laughing in our faces that they knew that was it. You know, they got away with murder. People just had enough of them and was pelting them with all sorts of fruit bottles and all sorts of things thrown at them. But they came across as exactly the type of person that they are. Evil, just came across just like that.
It's the first day of the trial. the day she's been waiting for 18 years, and I had perhaps naively expected Doreen and Stuart to be more upbeat.
We're just numb at the moment. The media attention is going to be even more intense than ever. I don't know, it's like something new. You know, it may be going on for 18 years, but it's still something new. Listening to the news this morning, you know, it's so clinical that how the reporters, how they talk about it is just a matter of fact. It's a statement. It's emotional involvement for me. Most of the stuff is resting on contamination.
What the prosecution is saying to us is that they're ready for all of that. They've got answers for all of it. I mean, dare I say, if we meet here 5 weeks' time, I think you'll have a conviction, Doreen.
What do they say? The proof of the pudding is in the eating. So until that actually happens, nobody can be certain.
You ready?
If there's such a thing as being ready. Well, just put one foot in front of the other, really, as I've been doing for the past 18 years, really.
In the following weeks, the Lawrences would hear testimony from dozens of police and forensic witnesses. And for the first time, the case against David Norris was revealed.
On a sweatshirt that was found in his bedroom of his address during the original search of his house, there were 6 fibres that matched Stephen's trousers, and also a fibre that matched Stephen's polo shirt. And on his jeans, there was found amongst the debris on the surface 2 very, very small fragments of hair, and a mitochondrial DNA profile of that hair matches Stephen Lawrence and his maternal relatives.
Norris would tell the jury the garments didn't belong to him, whilst Dobson said he hadn't worn the key jacket for years before the murder. And Dobson's defence mounted a stinging attack on the principal piece of evidence, the bloodstain on the jacket collar. They claim that one of these dried blood fragments from Stephen found their way onto Dobson's jacket through cross-contamination. When scientists tested the jacket for traces of saliva, they sprayed it with water before covering it with a paper sheet and weights to squeeze them together. It's during this process, they say, that one of Stephen's blood flakes became liquid again and soaked into the fabric. The defence didn't offer any scientific experts of their own, but the lead prosecution scientist carried out a series of tests to see if this saliva examination could indeed explain the bloodstain.
During our experimentation, we were never able to replicate the stain on the collar using dried flakes of blood from Stephen Lawrence or from the blood from the packaging. The nature and appearance of that stain indicated that it was a result of wet blood landing on that garment, and it was not the result of the testing that had been conducted subsequently on the item.
So one of the explanations for the stain was that the wearer of that jacket was at the scene of the attack.
Yes.
But the jury was told how a comprehensive police review of the handling of each exhibit over the past 18 years exposed a series of contamination blunders. Given that this is one of the most high-profile unsolved murders in Britain, never mind in the Met, wouldn't the Lawrences be entitled to expect that these exhibits would have been better looked after?
Yes. I think that there were things that I wish were better, but they didn't affect the evidence that we've placed before the court. I am not a scientist, so I go to scientists, and had they have said to me, well, that is a disaster, then I would have, my heart would have sank. But at no stage did we get that.
4 weeks into the trial, after intense legal debate, a jury was shown the police surveillance video for the very first time, 17 years after it was recorded.
I'm telling you, I'm taking my skin the black alive. Torture and sex him alive.
Both defendants took to the stand to denounce their extreme racism and proclaim their innocence. Alibis were offered. Stephen and Pauline Dobson swore their son was at home at the time of the murder, as did Norris's mother. The defendant's fate is now in the hands of the jury, which, after 6 weeks of evidence, is sent out to consider its verdict. After deliberating for more than 8.5 hours, the jury has finally returned its verdict. Gary Dobson and David Norris have been found guilty of the murder of Stephen Lawrence. They now face prison. For the Lawrences, after a wait of more than 18 years, justice has finally been delivered. In her only post-verdict television interview, Doreen told me of her relief.
Just so numb. I think when we were told that the the verdict was in, it's just all of a sudden you just start to feel, gosh, panic. Whereas it before, even though I was sort of really holding myself, it just seems to have just got even tighter still. So when they said that, you just feel something inside, like snap, to say thank God. And then when it's both of them, that's even more.
And you were very emotional in court. Was it like an outpouring of 18 years of
grief? I don't know. I think some part of that, I just feel that, it's just releasing some of the stress and strain that's been happening over there. It's been built up for the past 18 years. It's not all out, because I just think I'm still, am I going to keep pinching myself to say that they've actually been found guilty? I think it'll take a little while to sink in. At some sort of justice, I want people to think.
For Doreen Lawrence, this verdict may represent a chance for closure. But for the Met and for Britain, the legacy of Stephen Lawrence will endure.
This case is an extraordinary case which has had more impact on policing than any other single case that I can think of in modern times, and possibly in the history of the Met. The way we approach homicide investigations is utterly changed. The way we approach working with families and with communities is completely changed. The face of the Met has changed.
I meet many people in my work, and the one thing they all say is what a fantastic job the Lawrences have done. And that's white people as well as black people. It's not necessarily just about black and white, it's about whatever background you're from. It means that you can't get away with doing the things that you did before.
Even after all this time, the name of Stephen Lawrence is instantly recognised, and even among people who weren't alive when he was killed. The name alone is a key to a whole series of issues and thoughts, positive ideas about Britain and race. If that's Stephen Lawrence's legacy, it's a very fine one. We should be very grateful to him.
Okay, Stephen's name going to go down in history for all sorts of things, and I just think, okay, that's a positive, but I'd rather have my son here than having his name attached to a legacy.
Gary Dobson and David Norris are now convicted of the murder of Stephen Lawrence. The other 3 original suspects continue to deny the murder. Luke Knight, Jamie Acortt and Neil Acortt remain free. The case remains open.